Baik, Bapak, Ibu, saya izin untuk memulai webinar pada hari ini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Head of Center for Transdisciplinary and Sustainability Sciences, CTSS-IPB University, Professor Damayanti Buhori. The Honorable Ms. Medria Hardinata, PhD, lecturer at the Department of Computer Science, IPB, as our moderator. The Honorable Dr. Lee Ann Nguyen Long from Department of Public Administration, University of Twente, Netherlands, as our speaker, and all of the participants of the 14th GSSS Graduate Student Seminar on Sustainability, Understanding Generative AI, Teaching, Learning, and Doing Research alongside ChatGPT. First of all, let us praise the Almighty God for His blessings and mercy so we can gather in this event today without any obstacles and in a healthy condition. And it is an honor for me, Erika Mutiara, as the Master of Ceremony today to meet all of you. Before the event starts, I would like to say thank you and give a warm welcome to all of you, all the participants who have joined in the Zoom meeting today. And I hope you are all good, healthy, and excited as much as I am for today's discussion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we start, we are going to hear a welcoming remark from the head of CTSS, Professor Damayanti Buhori. And to Professor Damayanti Buhori, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to Leanne. It's an honor to have you as our speaker today. So in this occasion, I would like to thank Leanne and also Ibu Medria as the moderator for today. I'd like to welcome all participants. So up to now, there's about 46 people. But Leanne, we actually got like 150 people who registered for this webinar. So I think people are just excited about this ChatGPT stuff. Actually, there has been several seminars on ChatGPT in Indonesia, but I think there is a different angle that you will bring to the table. So very happy to have you. Really, thank you so much. It's very early morning are you in Germany or in Netherlands? Yeah.
I'm in Germany right now. Yeah.
I'm in Germany. Okay. Yeah, it must be early morning and it's already 2 o'clock here. So just a short hello and just want to thank you and everyone who is here in our webinar today and really looking forward. And Ibu Medria, thanks so much. You're the right person to moderate this session. Thank you for giving your time to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Damayanti Buhori, for the welcoming remark. And ladies and gentlemen, as we all know from the topic of today's webinar and also from Professor Damayanti's speech, we are going to have an interesting discussion and also hear presentation about one of the most viral AI technologies recently that has been used by many people, and that is called ChatGPT. And we also are going to hear and discuss about how ChatGPT can be used in teaching, learning, and doing research, and how it affects our education. And before I invite and hand over the session to our moderator, I would like to introduce Mrs. Medria Hardinata, PhD, as our moderator by reading her CV. To the committee, can you please share screen the CV? All right. So Ms. Medria Kusumadewi Hardinata, PhD, is a lecturer at the Department of Computer Science, IPB University, and also a CTSS fellow. And she pursued her PhD in 2015 in Computer Science, University of New South Wales, Canberra. And she pursued her bachelor degree in Computer Science, Bogor Agriculture Institute, or IPB University in Indonesia. And she has a lot of work experiences. In 2016 until now, she became a lecturer equivalent as postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Computer Science, IPB University, Indonesia. And in 2014, she became a research assistant in University of New South Wales. And in 2013, she became data checking the school's research publication database in University of New South Wales, Canberra as well. And please welcome Mrs. Medria Dinata. How are you today, Miss Medria?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. So, are you ready to conduct this discussion and also Q&A session?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Mbak
All
Erika.
right. The
Right.
time is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Erika, and thank you, Prof. Damayanti, and also hello, Dr. Lian. Hopefully you're, how are you? Yeah. It's a bit raining here in Bogor, but hopefully it's sunny there. How's the weather in Germany right now?
It's also a little bit rainy here. I'm sorry,
It's
as
raining.
I'm always having
Okay.
trouble muting myself on this platform. It's also a
yeah.
little bit rainy today.
Mhm.
But the weather is getting warmer finally, and
Yeah.
so my
Yeah,
sweater's a little bit
but we
lighter
can hear
today.
your voice clearly, so it's all good. Yeah. I think we can
That's
start
good.
now. So thank you, Dr. Leanne, for be here today with us. So this seminar, I'm very excited to become a moderator for this event because, as we know, ChatGPT is like a technology is currently really happening, and like people are talking about that. It was like launching back in on November 2022, but millions of people are currently using that, and it's transforming the educational sector. So I'm really glad to you can have give a talk today. So before we start, please allow me to read the speaker's biography. So for the committee, could you please share Dr. Leanne's CV? Right. So Dr. Leanne Nguyen Long, PhD, is an assistant professor of public administration at University of Twente, and she pursued her Doctor of Philosophy, joint PhD in Public Policy and Political Science at Indiana University, Bloomington. And in 2001, she received her Bachelor of Arts, Economics and Political Science degree, also from the same university, Indiana University, Bloomington. And she has lots of work experiences. In 2015 to 2020, she was a postdoctoral fellow, Department of Environmental Science and Policy, University of California, Davis. And also in 2015 up to 2020, she was a researcher at the University of München Institute for Political Science. And in 2015, she was a research fellow at the University of München Institute for Political Science. All right. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Lee Ann to give a talk. So please, Dr. Lee, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try my best to keep this within the time allotted to me. I tend to be a little bit chatty, so I'll do my best. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so I'd like to ask everybody, could you see if you can raise your hand raising emoji so that I can see how many of you have control over that, so we can make sure that all comments are can be addressed in like in real time as we go through the presentation. I'd like to hear from you and learn with you and learn through you as well. So please try to see if you can raise your hand in the reactions. I'd like to see if that's
I think several people
great.
have already raised.
That's fantastic.
Hands. Yeah.
Great. And I'd also like to invite you to use the commenting button here in the chat, to use the chat, and I'd like to kindly ask the moderator to bring to my attention if there's something in the chat that I should address, because I'll be paying attention a lot to my slides during this talk. The reason for that is because I'm trying to have a narrative here, and sometimes because I get too excited about something, I might lose track, and so the slides are really there just as much for me as they are for you. So let's get started. May I become co-host of this talk so that I can share the slides that I've prepared for today?
So Mbak Erika and Tim, can you make Dr. Lee Ann as a co-host?
I think I already am.
Oh, you
Somebody
can do that.
2 steps ahead of me.
Yeah.
All right. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all clear.
Now,
Yeah.
I've recorded an introduction for today's talk. Artificial intelligence, or AI, refers to the development of intelligent machines that can perform tasks typically requiring human cognition, such as perception, reasoning, and decision-making. AI is a rapidly growing field with a wide range of applications, including in sustainability. Generative artificial intelligence has the ability to generate novel, creative, and even surprising outputs. Generative AI can help researchers and educators explore complex sustainability challenges in new and innovative ways, from generating simulations of complex environmental systems to producing virtual models of sustainable infrastructure and beyond. Generative AI offers powerful tools for advancing sustainability research and education. In this context, generative AI can help researchers and educators to develop new insights into the challenges facing our planet and identify innovative solutions that promote sustainability and resilience. This introduction will explore the potential applications of generative AI in sustainability research and education, highlighting some of the key benefits and challenges associated with this emerging field. So, how many of you think that I wrote this introduction?
Maybe the audience can raise their hand if you think. It's hard to distinguish between human and machine right now. So, right. I think, yeah, if you think that it's generated by a machine, you don't need to raise your hand. But if you think it's from Dr. Lee, you can raise your hand. I don't know.
I think because you asked, so I guess it is not your voice.
Indeed, it is my voice, but they are not my words. And I've heard somewhere that ChatGPT, I always say ChatGPT, and you'll catch me doing that a lot throughout this talk, but ChatGPT is like a mouth without a brain. And so I provided that mouth for the introduction. And here we are. And I just want to show you, I asked ChatGPT to write an introduction to artificial intelligence and sustainability. And I took the first part of that text and I appended it to another text that I asked ChatGPT to write, which is about generative artificial intelligence and research and education and sustainability. And I would like to point out some key features of the output. So as you can see, the output is really well written, possibly even better written than something that I could come up with. However, it's very generic. So if you can see, there are some texts that are repeated throughout it. Throughout it, it's repeating some kind of patterns in the text. So here in the top, it talks about how it talks about the development, and so speaking in sort of like what it can do, but without some kind of thought about like actual examples, actual thinking behind it, actual criticality. So, and there's even sort of repetition in the way that verbs are used in connection to the rest of the text. And that plays out throughout the whole text. And the shocking lack of, the shocking lack of errors in writing already indicates to you, ooh, this might not be a human writer. Even when we have text editors who help us with things, there will still be some problems with the writing, some kind of ingenuity in the way that the text is presented. And finally, there are no bursts of creativity throughout it. The content of this text comes again and again and again. So here it is, there's just some part of the machine. What part of this is human? So you can see me already adding a word here, deleting some words, taking from some of the output of ChatGPT and adding it to the other. But another part of that is human, is the questions that I ask ChatGPT and the level of specificity that I give ChatGPT when asking these questions. So let's go through this again. As Dami has already said, I'm sorry, as the professor has already said, there have been many seminars and webinars on ChatGPT, not just in Indonesia, but across the globe. And a lot of these resources are available through you through the World Wide Web. So I don't think that I'm going to be blowing your mind in terms of content. I hope that what we're going to do is be critical together and think about the tool together. So let's go. How many of you have used ChatGPT already? This is a question that I'd like to ask. If you've used ChatGPT already, I'd like to invite you to just raise your hand or put a 1. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think there are quite a lot. Oh,
Quite a
1,
lot.
2, 3, 5. Yeah, more than 5.
I'm seeing quite a few hands being raised.
Mhm, mhm.
I'd like to ask you guys in the chat to volunteer. What was the experience like? What were the emotions that you felt as you played around with the software? And I'm going to look at the chat as you type in. So how did you feel when you asked ChatGPT, this chat box?
Can
Yeah,
we just answer directly, or maybe the audience can type the answer, yeah, in the chat
I'm looking
box?
at, in the
Mhm.
chat box.
Yeah, okay.
What were emotions that you felt? Excited. Yeah, I see the word excited in the chat. Flabbergasted. Yeah, how did it do that, right? I see scared, excited, amazed, a little bit worried. The idea that it might be helpful. Somebody wrote that they used it to create a cover letter to apply for an internship, and they feel quite confident that the result will be great, but they still have to write a keyword in more detail. Somebody else said it was amazing. So they're all and scary. So I'm seeing a mix of emotions in response to the AI. Some are very excited and also in awe, like in pure awe of the software, of the tool. Let's call it a tool, actually, because it's a combination of different things. But a lot of us are also feeling a little bit of trepidation and uncertainty around this new tool. And here I have to say that all of these emotions are normal. There's been a long time, a lot of conversations around, will we, to what extent can humans control some of the tools that we're using, right? And to what extent will tools be used for public values, for things that we value? And to what extent can tools be used in a way that is not useful and maybe even harmful to society? And so ChatGPT is not the first tool that we've introduced into society. Think about a kitchen knife, right? A kitchen knife can be very, very helpful. And at the same time, it can be very, very harmful. And so here we're going to explore that. And so I'd like to start here by stopping and saying, I'm not an expert in computer science. So I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a social scientist, and I study sustainability. But I also study sustainability at the interface of humans, technology, and society. And here we're going to look at how this new technology might be creating important disruptions and opportunities for us as people and as scientists, and also just as citizens. And I'm going to go through this talk in terms. First, I'm going to talk about education. I'd like to have a reflection with you about research. And then finally, we'll talk about how this might affect us as citizens in democracies. I'd like to first begin, though, with a brief introduction into the tool. Most of you will already know this. It looks like you've played with the tool. Most of you will know some of this jargon, but I think it's a good thing to make sure that those of us who aren't, including myself perhaps from 3 years ago, or even a couple days ago, we have some common language and we know what we're talking about when we're talking about ChatGPT or generative AI, okay? So for those of you who know about this, please bear with me. We're just going to go through just this little stroll in the first part of it, and then we'll get into the meat of this thing. So what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence has been around for quite a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and use a definition from the Oxford Dictionary. So those of you who are fans of mathematics know algorithms to just be about a process or a set of rules. So they are rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations. We've been using them since our arithmetic lessons in grade school. We've been using algorithms such as the Pythagoras rule, right? We've been using these kinds of rules to I could remember from geometry, sorry, AAA, so all of the angles must equal 180 degrees in a triangle. So these are kind of algorithms, and they're used and they gain power through use by computer. Some of us now in current times, we think of them as a step-by-step guide to solving a problem. And so we can think about it as a recipe of sorts. If you'd like to have a meal, what are the different steps you need to take to arrive at the meal? And as a way to ease some of our burdens, our cognitive burdens, perhaps we don't really want to make all of these decisions. And perhaps it is good with so many choices out there, with so much information out there, especially since the birth of the internet, with so many things at our fingertips, perhaps it is helpful to have a machine learn on the data and provide us with advice based on a set of rules we give it for our preferences, right? Now, how can we use algorithms in sustainability? There are so many examples. So at the university where I work, and perhaps also at the university where you work, we're using algorithms to help us use energy more sustainably, to inform us of when we're more active and when we're less active, and what we can do in order to change our health behaviors, how we can use algorithms perhaps to monitor some of our sleep times and advise us perhaps now we should sleep more. Those of you who have smartwatches, which I don't have, might be using algorithms to inform you on when would be the best time to rest, when would be the best time to get a meal. You might be using an algorithm later on to decide where to go to dinner, or to decide which shoes to buy for your son or daughter. So algorithms are there and they're present, and we're using them for sustainability. In one project that I'm involved in, we're thinking about smart grids and how to distribute community energy, so energy that is produced by households through solar panels, how to distribute that within a community using a smart grid system. And we combine data from sensors into the system, and we use algorithms to help simulate energy use and to create a more flexible and also efficient use of energy. And the social science part of it is to understand how humans engage with the technology, the new kinds of rules that they create through this knowledge that they're generating, how they can help in the design of such an information system, and how they also make sure that that design is inclusive and considerate of their needs as human beings and centered around human and environmental needs just as much as they are for the efficiency and the efficacy of the technology. You're probably also more informed than I am about generative AI. So I'm just going to go over some basic points that I've learned also through webinars, also through listening through podcasts, also through listening to colleagues who are more well-informed than I am. So what is generative AI? It is an algorithm that can generate a media. So for example, images, text, or other forms of media. It learns, and where does it learn from? It is trained on massive amounts of data that is made available to it. And what it does is it identifies and extracts patterns from data. And more importantly, what makes it a little bit different from the algorithms that we're used to, those decision tools that we're used to, is that it is also predictive. So it predicts the next output, given the sequence of inputs that right now, it's just we as humans, that we give it, right? And perhaps in the future, it can be interacting with another machine, right? But at this point in time, it is using our inputs to predict the next step. It is helping us there. Therefore, it responds to questions, and human interaction is a part of it. We're part of that creative and generative process. It generates through us, and with the data we have supplied it, so it is human. It is part of human. It is also human, and it carries all the imagination and creativity that we humans bring. And as you know, also a lot of our errors and a lot of our biases are brought forward also in generative AI, as it is in all AI, actually. So here in the human part, I see something in the chat, so I'm going to pause for a minute. Yeah, so sorry, I'll come back to that later. There's a prompt engineering, which is the way in which we provide tools, input to the algorithm. That is now, just for you guys to think about, is now even being thought of as perhaps one of the new jobs of the future, one of the new ways, one of the new skills that we can be teaching our young people. This is one of the things that is increasingly being looked at in education. How do we help our students become more effective when engaging with generative AI? Does anybody have questions at this point? I don't see any questions.
Yeah, it's just comment from Zoid Hassan. So amazing news for all of you that yesterday in Pakistan, a judge of session court took help from ChatGPT for resolving a case. So, and it gave 100% result.
I think that is an interesting result, and I think we should also. I would like to actually circle back to this later on. So could you remind me of this comment, because I think that this is interesting. But I have some thoughts about this, and I would like to hear everybody else's thoughts about this as well. So let's circle back to this comment about how we can use ChatGPT to ease our burdens. And we have another comment about errors in ChatGPT. So a GPT, as I said, I always put the T in front of the P, and that's not great. So yes, we will also talk about the errors and how that might how we should be careful of that in our use of this. So coming back to prompts, there's good prompts and there's bad prompts. I will provide later on some links to some of the things that I found online. You probably also have looked through this, how to you can actually just on your search engine or even ask ChatGPT, what are the most effective ways to engineer your prompts, there's advice such as be mindful of the verbs, make your instructions more clear, use examples sometimes, use a thesaurus with different versions of a verb to try to get the best result that you can. Coming back to the idea of prompts, I also sit on the ethics committee for my faculty, so I assess applications for ethics assessment. So when our researchers go into the field, I read through their applications. I decide what level of ethics approval they require, if it's something that has negligible human subjects impacts, or if it's something that might have higher human and social and environmental impacts, then I flag it and then I discuss with the researcher. And when ChatGPT was coming on the horizon as a concern in teaching, because of academic integrity, I decided that we should also speak about it in terms of research, and we should think about the ethics around it. And I had a very interesting conversation with a colleague who is in our computer science department. And he said, well, you know, people, don't forget that there's a human element to the AI. And there are prompts and there are better prompts. So he gave the example of a colleague who he has a little dog, and he asks the AI, hey, why should I give my dog red tomatoes? And ChatGPT will apparently provide a really interesting discussion on why you should give ChatGPT tomatoes. But he said that the colleagues asks a better question. Why shouldn't I give my dog tomatoes? And then perhaps you could get better advice around feeding your dog tomatoes. And so there's this kind of idea that there are prompts and there are better prompts, and some prompts rely on the human moderator, on the human interlocutor. And so what ChatGPT gives you is just as good as you. However, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be errors regardless, because it's also based on human data, on data that we as humans produce. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So, as I said, AI has been around for a long time. A lot of you know that better than I do. I've sort of been the object of AI more than the student of AI. But there seems to be something special about generative AI. It is out of nowhere imbuing us with both a sense of awe and fear at the same time, and a sense of trepidation. It comes back to the question that is essential to artificial intelligence. That is, to what extent can machines approximate humans? So also, can they beat humans, right? A lot of us who've seen AI beat the Go champion and the chess champions have this thought, oh no, is it getting too smart? But really, it's not getting too smart. It's just a smarter version of us. The question is, to what extent can AI approximate humans? And this brings me to I don't know if you've heard about Anima. There's a really, really interesting essay on HuffPost published by a young lady who had an AI boyfriend. And if you'd like, please read that essay. It's very, very interesting and fun. But to what extent can, so what is our measure for deciding that a machine, not necessarily just an AI, that a machine is approximating a human? Well, there's a test for this, and many of you probably already know about it. It's the Turing test, right? And in his essay, in his path-breaking essay, from more than 50 years ago, so really, well, actually more than 70 years ago now, right? In an essay called Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence, Mind says, in the journal Mind, Alan Turing, the British computer scientist, one of the most innovative human beings to have walked the earth, right? Asked, what is the test for knowing that a machine is intelligent? And the test, he says, is that a machine might be intelligent if it can regularly fool people into thinking that they're a human being. So there are different kinds of machines. I've heard about a machine that can make a reservation for you at the restaurant, and the people on the other end of the phone don't realize that they're talking to a machine. So the Turing test is basically, to what extent would another human being think that this was a human that had produced some kind of thing that they're engaging with. And to that extent, ChatGPT seems to, at least for many of us teachers who are grading essays right now, it seems that it could pass this test. So the generative pre-trained transformer, this is, now we're at ChatGPT 4, so it's been through numerous iterations, right? It used to be just GPT. And what it does is it transforms language input from us into output, which predicts something that it sees as discerns as useful to us based on patterns in the data. And it fools us and others, perhaps, into thinking that it's almost human-like. So here we are. This is one of the cool things you'll see on ChatGPT as you'll get into it. And it gives you examples of what it can do. It tells you what it's capable of. And it also tells you about its limits. Is it good for something? You all seem to think so. And it produces average of all previous data. So it's good for things where you need something that's not par excellence, not fantastic, not perfect, not innovative in a way, right? Like not as we scale creative, but it's average. It's average. It meets the regular conventions of standard writing. And it can be done quickly, right? And so in that sense, most of the advice that you get from experts is to use it in low-stakes practices. For us teachers, we've heard about people using ChatGPT or other generative AI to help us in our assessments. For when we're asking our students to write notes, sometimes we could ask the GPT to assess those notes because we want to pay attention to the longer essays or to some of the more creative projects, such as the project groups. And so we ask the GPT to provide instant feedback to students to make them understand if they're going in the right direction in terms of logic and thinking. So perhaps we can use ChatGPT for low stakes practices. In the chat here, we heard about a court case which was decided by an AI. That doesn't seem very low stakes to me. So we're going to go a little bit into the ethics of that later on. Again, it's for the automation of repetitive and easy tasks. Now, I'd like to know a little bit more about the court case, because if it's a court case for a traffic violation, did you park your car incorrectly? Did you run a red light too long? What should your fine be? Were you driving too fast? What should your fine be for that? Perhaps in this case, a low stakes enough. We can ask the ChatGPT to assign a fine, but for something like theft or something that is higher on the punitive scale, we might ask ourselves, do we want an AI to make these kinds of things? Because the AI might not take things into consideration that we would do. Is this the only breadwinner in the family, right? Was there were they speeding because there was a pregnant person in the car, and other kinds of things? Perhaps we have to think about these factors. Okay. So what does automation mean for teaching and learning? I guess this is one of the reasons you're here, because that's part of the talk title. And I'm wondering, have you thought about this already? What does automation mean for your teaching and learning?
So maybe the audience can write it down in the chat box, or maybe someone want to share their answer. So maybe while waiting the answer from the audience, I would like to also answer, Dr. Lee. Yeah, because so I have experience with my students. They use ChatGPT for doing assignment. And also, so sometimes we need to, as a teacher, we need to be really careful. And sometimes if they write a thesis or something like that, they can just generate an abstract by asking ChatGPT. So that's like, I'm amazed at the same time, but also we need to still have a human in the loop to control that. Yeah.
And I agree with you on that. I think we're very, very lucky because it's now April. So we've had a little bit of time to digest and to think more about ChatGPT. And I think that, I think one of the benefits that we have is that we now have had time to see that the world didn't end because the AI was introduced and we're able to still teach. But I think a lot of the first issues with ChatGPT have to do with academic integrity, right? And so are our students using this tool to try to fool us? And we have to remember there's a little bit of pride in that. I know that when my first ChatGPT assignments started to come in, I felt, oh, this is hurtful. Are they fooling me? Are they trying to pull the wool over my eyes? And that instinct is something that we have, and it's completely normal. And I think that there's a few things to consider. First, there will always be some subsection of our students who don't always behave in a manner, unfortunately, with high academic integrity. I've been teaching long enough to remember when Wikipedia first came out and when students would just cut and paste some information from Wikipedia instead of going to the library or reading the essays. And we know also that there are services that some wealthier students, at least here in the Netherlands, can go through, or where they ask ghostwriters to write some of their thesis and essays. So there will always be a subset of our student population that may or may not, for whatever reason in their life, feel tempted or fall into the temptation to cheat. And that's unfortunate. And we have to hope that they gain some learning regardless of their behavior. But more generally, I think that we have to think of our students as people that we can also teach academic integrity to, if they don't already have it. Many of our students have a high motivation to learn. They want to learn, they want to understand, we want to inspire them. And I think we can think about at what point in time do we already introduce academic integrity to our students? And I would argue that university is a little bit too late. We need to already imbue them with this academic integrity. We need to think about how we revise our grade school education and our high school education to encourage students to understand that learning is something that is beneficial as an exercise. So the question about academic integrity is there. We also need to train ourselves as teachers, I think, about how often we bring that up in our classrooms. The second part of thing is that when our students use the software, they're not only cheating us, they're also sometimes cheating themselves, and they're missing out on key cognitive development milestones when they automatically go to the AI tool. When they don't struggle, make mistakes, find solutions that we didn't even imagine as teachers, they're missing out on their own cognitive development. I think just as much learning happens in the mistakes that our students make as does in the correct answers. It's about getting to the correct answers and perhaps even innovating along the way. So there is a cost in cognitive development when we don't use certain basic skills. The question is, how do we make sure that these skills are developed even with perhaps alongside these new tools? And let's remember that AI is only one among a new set of technology tools that we're introducing in the classroom right now. Another question is about inclusion. I don't know what the situation is like in Indonesia. I'm very, very ignorant about that, I will admit. But in the Netherlands, not everybody perhaps is going to go to university where they will get exposure to generative AI in the classroom and get guidance on that. And perhaps even within the same university. So I'm in a university of technology. Not every student, it might depend on what faculty they go to, whether or not they're being taught how to use these tools. So there's also a question about inclusion. Who is getting access to these tools and learning about these tools and learning how to leverage them to their benefit? And so these are points that we have. On the flip side of these concerns that we might have as teachers, whether our students, it might, be a temptation for students to behave in a way that does not fulfill our expectations of academic integrity, if it interferes with their cognitive development as students, if there are students who are systematically excluded from using the technology, also because of the limitations of how our disciplinary limitations, there's also a flip side. So I already brought up the idea that perhaps we could ease our assessments as teachers. Can the technology ease teacher burdens? Can it decrease the advantages of English speakers? So I know I sound like this. I had an American education for quite a bit of time, but I'm actually Filipino and Vietnamese, and I actually think in Tagalog, which is the Filipino language. And I know that there is a publication bias that favors native English speakers. So can we help our students leverage technologies like this to learn how to write more effectively, to learn how to communicate more effectively, to mimic the AI sometimes, so that we can get rid of some of these advantages that native English speakers have when they're communicating their science? After all, native English speakers don't have the monopoly over great ideas and great sciences. I know this when I visit home and I speak with colleagues from the Philippines. I'm like, wow, we are calling this citizen science, but you guys have been doing this forever, And so perhaps these kinds of tools can give us a competitive edge that the native English speakers who think and reason in this way once had. And perhaps this is one way that we can think about using this tool in an academic setting. These are just reflections that I've had. I'm wondering if any of you have had similar reflections. Perhaps we can talk about that later. And so we'll make a point to come back to this and ask, what does this mean for teaching and learning? How can we use this? Always, however, thinking about these concerns around academic integrity, our students' development and inclusion. So there's some advice. I don't know if any of you subscribe to the Chronicle, Inside Higher Education, but there's also some advice to universities around creating equity, policies that encourage equity around AI, because as I've mentioned, not every faculty will have sort of the competency to teach students how to use generative AI to their benefit. And so universities are being encouraged, should be encouraged to also have to have a policy that makes sure that such a tool is being used equitably and be across the faculty in a way that is kind to our teachers. Having come out of the pandemic, I think a lot of us already, I just had to learn how to teach on Zoom. I just had to learn how to use all of these new didactic tools. And now you want me to teach about generative AI or use it in my classroom? Are you kidding me? But so I think also within this policy, we also have to think about a way to be kind to our teachers and to be kind to one another when doing this. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to learn from each other. And I'd also like to learn from you about your experiences about using it in the classroom. It's also a great opportunity for us to learn from others. So I'd like to highly recommend this article that was published. And I'll share my slides, of course. I'll send my slides over after this talk so that can be distributed to registered users. And I think there's a recording of this as well. I'd like to really recommend this article, which is basically a well-curated collection of advice from teachers. And here on the left, I've put the main points of advice that I have integrated into my own teaching since reading this article in January. So one of the things is that AI may or may not be appropriate across different activities, learning activities in your classroom. And so one of the things you could do is to teach students the appropriate uses of AI writing tools. It's not for writing your assignments, but it might be helpful in other ways. So such as how to position your argument more effectively in a text, right? So in order to do that, unfortunately, we have to learn how to use the AI. We have to experiment with it. We have to take some time. I was very hesitant. I didn't open my account until much later, embarrassingly later. But, and know that ChatGPT is not the only AI tool out there. But learning about some of these tools, even simple tools like Grammarly, for example, that is out there, but that's a pay-for-service tool, I believe. I'm not sure. And then think about that tool in the context of your learning objectives, right? What do you need your students to learn during your semester or quarter? And perhaps to think about what of those things the AI can assist with, and what of those things need to be done without the aid of AI, and to be very explicit about that when speaking with your students. And that's something that we do in our teaching, me and some of my colleagues, we think about it. Another thing is that it's possible to go all the way in an extreme direction, to forget that we have many tools that we have always been using in our classroom and that are just as effective as AI. And we shouldn't leave them behind just because this new and exciting toy has come around, or tool, sorry, not toy, tool and toy. And so we can keep the old tools close: pencil and paper, dialogue, role play, group work, challenge-based learning. A lot of these things we can still have in our classrooms alongside the AI tool. I think another piece of advice that I thought was very helpful was that we need to think about beyond ChatGPT. ChatGPT is very current, but there are that this technology, generative AI, but also other AI tools and also other non-AI tools are quickly developing, and we have to think about this as something that so really, really think about our learning objectives. Really, really think about that, and not thinking about like, do I have to learn a new tool every time? No, think about how to use this most effectively and understand that there will be other new tools that come in, and focus more on what we want our students to learn. I think I don't have to tell you guys this. I know all of you who teach are really thinking about this very carefully. But the thing that I found most interesting was to put responsibility back on our students. Make our students responsible for their learning. Remind them that they are responsible for ethically using AI. It is their responsibility to have this kind of ethical relationship with one another, with us as a teacher, and with the technology itself, and to not abuse or misuse that technology. That is their responsibility, that they are old enough and smart enough and wise enough to be responsible for that. And I thought that that was a really good piece of advice. And we can remind them of that by asking good questions around the question of responsibility when engaging in technology. So I just like to show an example of how I might use an AI tool in a classroom. So I'm going to share a different screen. And I'm really debating on whether I want to do this, now or in the discussion point. But I think we can ask ChatGPT a question, and then maybe we'll do this in the discussion section. Yeah, we'll do this in the discussion. So I'll just keep with a conversation. But I would like to have an exercise with you a little bit later on, because I know time is running out. I don't have a lot to say about doing research with ChatGPT. You see ChatGPT there, I said. So ChatGPT. I know that it's been used as a tech collaborator. So already in January, there have been articles that have been published that there were as many as 4 articles that cited ChatGPT as a collaborator or a co-author. There's a debate about this right now, and I'm not sure where I stand on this debate. But I do think that we should all admit that we think about this also as a research tool, and we have to think about how different is it? What are the differences between this and, for example, a search engine? Well, remember, it's actually using some learning. It's actually using some predictive things, and so does a search engine. Where are the limits? Right? And so would you cite a search engine in your paper? Probably not. But ChatGPT has many more affordances than the search engine does. And therefore we have to think about also what is ethical research when we use such a tool. To what extent do we cite the tool? To what extent do we own the intellectual product when engaging with the tool? We really have to think about this in this way. Now, there are caveats related to it. And earlier, one of our participants reminded us that when they used ChatGPT, it came back with an error. And in fact, I asked ChatGPT, what can't my students do, actually, or researchers do, while working with you? And ChatGPT says, well, university students should know that the tool cannot provide 100% accurate or infallible answers. Errors will occur. So it rests on the discernment still of the user to understand what is error and what is not. It cannot make decisions alone. The decision rests still on us, right? What to include, what to exclude, it cannot provide emotional or psychological support. And there are certain protocols that it will not violate. There's also certain things that it cannot do in a way. It can't be critical. It can't be ethical. It can't be careful in the ways that we are. So there's things that we have to consider when dealing with the technology. And this brings me to the last few points that I have for this talk before we make it a discussion and open up for dialogue. That is, I come from the mindset of responsible innovation, and responsible innovation is really just is just like a word, a phrase that means that we have to take into consideration the ethical and societal impacts of any innovation, even at the very beginning of its inception. So already at the design stage, it is important to consider the implications that any technology has for society and ethically. And it's important to always safeguard public values in the creation of a new technology. And here on the right side, or at least on the right side of my screen, there's one of many institutes that are concerned, focusing specifically on the ethics of AI. It's DARE. DARE is run by the ex-ethics officer for Google. And I really would invite all of you to visit their website. They have 2 ongoing research projects. They're actually looking for a researcher right now, a community-based researcher. So if any of you are looking for a job, perhaps you could apply there as well. But I really invite you to visit their site and to follow their work. Again, they're not the only ethical AI watchdog out there, but they're one that I follow. And then I want to go into basically some of the risks, and you've probably already thought about these. So I asked earlier what you felt, and some of you said you were scared. And I'm wondering if any of you watched the film Minority Report. If any of you are old enough like me to have gone to the cinema to watch Minority Report.
Anyone? I haven't. No, I only watched Terminator. Yeah, it's like,
I honestly think that if you really want to see good in the world, have a sci-fi filmmaker put it out there, like, oh, greener forests, have that be part of a sci-fi film, and the engineers will engineer it. No, I'm just kidding. But okay, so Minority Report is an okay-ish movie with Tom Cruise in it about predictive policing. So they can already read the thoughts of people and anticipate if they're going to commit a crime, and they can arrest them, therefore. And it goes, all right. That movie is based on a book by Philip K. Dick, actually a story, also called Minority Report. And it highlights some of the challenges or threats that come with outsourcing our decision-making, outsourcing the responsibility for choice to a machine. And I would like to point you to this book by Cathy O'Neil. I read this book way before the pandemic. I actually read this book when my last child was born, so 7 years ago, because they can't do much except read when they're very, very small. And you're feeding them. So I read this book, Weapons of Math Destruction. And it's written by Cathy O'Neil. And Cathy O'Neil was an academic, is a researcher who has also worked in tech. And she reminds us in this book that algorithms are not objective. It is actually from her where I got the recipe analogy. So algorithms are like recipes. They tell you how to make a meal. But in her analogy, the person who's using the algorithm or designing the recipe has very different objectives. They might be more in favor of a healthy meal for them. So they define success. So the person who's writing the recipe might define success as healthiness. Somebody else might define it as tastiness. Some might define it in terms of the look of the dish that comes out. Some might define it in terms of feeding more people at a lower budget, right? So it is the designer who decides what is successful when they create the algorithm. So in other words, algorithms are shaped by design choices, and those choices carry forward the biases of designers. And not only that, they're based on massive sets of data, and that data carries forward the design choices of the people who design the data collection tools. Most of you who are researchers know that, their preferences and their priorities. So preferences, priorities, biases of designers are carried forward in the decisions they make during the design stage of any algorithm or of any data collection activity. So she says that generally she's a fan of AI, just like I am, right? Or you are. You're a fan of algorithms because you use them. You use them to get you from point A to point B, right? When I was recently in a new city, I just got my phone on, I went to Google Maps and I asked Google Maps, how do I get to my friend's house and I've never been in the city before? And algorithms are really there, AI is really there to be helpful to us, but they can be also insidious and they can also be harmful. And she says there's a subset of algorithms that are insidious and harmful. And these are what she calls the weapons of math destruction. It's a fun name. And what are the three core features of the weapons of math destruction? First is that they are widespread in their impact. So just like the courts, they impact everybody's lives. Second, that they are secret. And by secret, she means they are not transparent. The people who are using them don't understand that they are being used, perhaps, or even when they understand that they are being used, they don't understand the core design features of the algorithm. They cannot discern how the algorithm operates, right? In a layman's understanding. So it is like a black box to them. And therefore, they are not able to exercise their own self-determination vis-a-vis the algorithm. And finally, they are potentially destructive. And by potentially destructive, they can be systematically marginalizing, harming, or hurting a subset of the population. So let's think about how this could happen. I gave the example of the Minority Report. The example that she gives is predictive policing in the book. So this is one of the examples. Predictive policing is based on data that is collected by police. But if police and she uses the United States context, okay? So let's remember that this book is about the United States context. So I'm not talking about Indonesia here. I'm not talking about the Philippines or Germany here. I'm talking about the United States. And what she finds there is because neighborhoods of color are expected to have more police activity because police are monitoring these neighborhoods more and more, then the data that comes in has more focus on neighborhoods of color. And therefore, predictive policing will also carry these biases forward when deciding where the crimes are going to be. The data carries these biases forward. In the Netherlands last year, we had a massive controversy. It was called the Toeslag affair. And I don't know if any of you have followed that in the news, whereby a tool, an algorithm used by the bureaucracy, which was there mainly to help make decisions and detect fraud around childcare benefits, was targeting immigrant recipients. because of the quality of the data that was being put in. So immigrant recipients, people with an immigrant background, were more likely to be detected as fraudulent, many of which were errors actually by the algorithm, than native Dutch beneficiaries. There are many other examples where predictive policing, fraud detection, and even healthcare algorithms or education algorithms carry forward the biases of the people who design them. So when we're creating our assessments, even when we're asking ChatGPT to assess our students' assignments, we should also be thinking, what are some standards that I don't hold as important, but that are standards that are carrying forward some of the stereotypes about students and student learning that I find problematic? Am I outsourcing that to ChatGPT? And is ChatGPT teaching my students wrong lessons about how they think and reason? These are things that we have to consider. So we've already talked about biases in algorithms. These biases that we have in normal algorithms can be expected to also be carried forward in ChatGPT. And some things that you might think about is, who are we building these systems for? Remember that they are being built normally by Anglo computer scientists. So in what languages? So what kind of knowledge bases are not being considered? You know, ChatGPT and many of these generative AI really are trained on English. So what kind of knowledge bases are being missed are not being trained on? What kind of understandings are being missed? What kind of biases are being brought forward? And what kind of cultural understandings? Also important when we think about ethics and morals, we have to remember that ChatGPT says, I'm not allowed to do certain things. I'm not allowed to break some of these cultural ethics and norms. But those are also Western ethics and norms, and that ethics and morals are also culturally contingent, and they may not bring forward our ethics. You know, our ethics as a culture. I say that as a Filipino. I say that we have many similarities in our ethical and moral standings as the West, but we have some that are some related to reciprocity, to respect, to responsibility that might be uniquely our own, coming from our own culture and our own land. And those will not be carried forward by the AI, and that can be perpetuated in ways that are harmful for us when using the AI. I say that also as a social scientist who studies social development, social evolution, and the evolution of governance. There's also the question of consent. A lot of us produce this information without thinking that it's going to one day be used by an AI to generate output. We don't do that. We don't write our research articles thinking that an AI will be using it as input. So there's beyond the question just of copyright, there's also the question of the consent on the content. So consent is not even considered when these machines are being trained. They're being fed a whole lot of data that wasn't designed for them or by them. And so a lot of the philosophers out there are now debating what are the ethical and moral implications around consent. Finally, we've heard a lot about a chat box that after 4 days became a very terrible human being, or a very terrible AI that was using curse words and racist slurs. I think all of us have heard about this chat box. But there is also a question of whether AI can learn harmful behavior. AI can be fed harmful behavior and learn harmful behavior. We know that it can, and we should be watchful of that. And that's where the question of responsible innovation comes into play. So, and I see a couple chats. Questions.
Yeah. Are we going to the question and answer session, or you still have something to share?
I still have one things to share.
Cool. Yeah.
So I just saw the chat box go red, and
yeah.
I'm very spoiled here because I have a moderator. You don't know. Right?
It's all right.
Okay.
You can still continue, and after this, we go to the question and answer session. Yeah, no worries.
Okay. So who will be using, impacting, or being impacted by AI? And the fact that we, and I don't know if there are any students in the audience, but we can also impact the AI. We can also shape it. We can also contribute to its shaping, and we can also make sure that some of the things that we value are represented in the development of generative AI. And so I think that aside from also developing our own generative AI, developing our own technological tools in Southeast Asia and outside of Southeast Asia, we also can think about how we can shape the tools that are currently under development by providing certain inputs and by feeling empowered to contribute in this way. I'd like to finally talk about, because of the fact that AI could perpetuate harmful behavior, there is a question around whether or not we should regulate generative AI. And I will say that it is being discussed here in Europe and also in the West. So I think many of you might have heard the news that Italy has banned ChatGPT over privacy concerns. So an entire country has banned the software. And I was recently there, and I don't know if they know that I was using it while I was there to prepare this talk. But they have banned it. So I can monitor.
But now you moved to Germany, yeah?
I was there for Easter to visit my mother and
Yeah.
father, and I was using it just yesterday, and so they didn't catch me. And second, in the United States, there's a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that is being developed under the Biden administration. A lot of this blueprint mainly anchors to the question of inclusivity and equity, not just in the use of AI, who benefits from AI, but also in its design. And at the European Union, there is an AI regulation that is currently being developed and has been being developed for a long, long time. There are many landscapes and areas where there is no such legislation being designed. There is no such discussion. And we can also think about whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. As AI is moving into our cars, into our traffic systems, into many of these other areas, we might be thinking beyond just generative AI about these are systems that need to be governed, whether or not they need to be governed, and if so, how. I don't think we want to go all the way to banning, but I think that we want to make sure that certain societal and environmental protections are in use, are in play when thinking of the questions of governances. I think our universities, as universities of technology as well, or even social science universities, are also uniquely placed to provide input into the question of how it is governed, how we help citizens understand the rights and responsibilities vis-a-vis these new technologies, and how we can empower them to have a language that helps them to assert their citizenship rights around, again, I misspelled ChatGPT, around these new technologies. And I think that as my last slide, returning to the limitations of this and the further development of it. Remember, so limitations, you might think about it as saying it's a go or no go. I tend to think of limitations as areas for improvement, innovation, and creativity. So I think of limitations as spaces where we can operate to generate even greater social value. You might be interested in a lot of things around. If you're really interested, I would highly recommend this book, Machines Who Think by Pamela McCormick. It's about artificial intelligence. It's about the history of artificial intelligence. And she goes all the way back to ancient Greece and also to Buddhism, and talks about all of the different times we've tried to make machines intelligent. And if you want to say, hey, Leanne, what's the #1 way that you think about for making sure that I benefit from technological tools without, or I can help my students think about benefiting from technological tools without being harmed by them? Well, I don't know if you like Carl Sagan. I do. He's a really important, I would say, public intellectual at this, and this is his book, The Demon Haunted World. Carl Sagan's baloney detection kit is a small toolkit with critical thinking skills around which we can orient ourselves critical thinking skills like, that remind us about ad hominem attacks and how they don't hold value or water, about making sure that every link in a chain of reasoning is solid and sturdy, and about Occam's razor, and all of these different critical thinking tools. I think that we can benefit from new technologies while still sort of protecting ourselves or mitigating risks around them when we use our ethical lens, but also combine them with critical thinking skills. And so I invite all of us to remind our students of critical thinking skills. I use the baloney detection kit in my teaching because it's fun, and Carl Sagan is a fun character to introduce my students to. But I really invite you to do that. And I think that we can also here, think about when an AI generates knowledge for us, we should challenge the AI and challenge ourselves into thinking about this output and think about it critically and use it in this way. So that is the end of my talk. I thank you for your attention, and I hope that it wasn't too long or boring.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Very insightful talk. So we have talked about the definitions of AI, also generative AI, and how we can benefit in the education sector of using ChatGPT. But there's also some concerns, right? Ethical concerns and whether the students can use it responsibly or not. So we have lots of questions, Dr. Lee, from the audience, but what you first respond to some, we have some, I think, question here from, let me read it out, from Muhammad Onila. But before that, we have also some comments from Zohaid Hassan that talk about the news that in court they use ChatGPT to resolve the case, and also from Novrianti, she said that she has, I think, used ChatGPT, but she also got some errors. So would you like to comment on that first?
Yeah, so I think regarding the court case, it would be interesting to know what the court case was about. So I do think that there are, because courts deal with a lot of things. So let's remember that courts deal with a lot of things. And so I don't have enough information or details to understand what, so how did he see? I saw that in his comment, he said 100% correct. Does that mean that it aligns with other previous court decisions that were made by that court? So is that how they measure correctedness, like being correct or being right there, that the decision made by the AI is in line with previously with precedents, right? Legal precedents. Perhaps that is what the measure for correct is in this case. But I also wonder what the case was about, and how much details were fed into it, and how we determine correctness. And so I would think that this is great if it's for low-hanging fruit. So sort of these decisions that have low social impact, but where they can impact an entire family for a long time, where they hold human life in the balance, where somebody could be put in jail for quite a bit of time. I do think that some discernment and some background into the social and cultural context of the situation requires human intervention, perhaps advice, but remember always with the consideration that the tool makes errors. The tool is based on data that could or could not be accurate or biased. And the tool carries forward design choices that might not be what they're being used for here. So in terms of making errors, yes. And I've also seen student assignments with an error.
And it's also written, right, like when we open ChatGPT, that they cannot be like 100% correct, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so we go to the next question from Muhammad Unila. And he said AI would be a future solution for wide human activities. By the way, in the same time, it will be threats for human being. So in your opinion, how could we make a perfect combination of AI utilization for human beings? So thank you so much. It's like, how can we how human can make probably like a hybrid mutual symbiosis with machines or something like that. So would you like to comment on that?
That's a very good question, and it's a very difficult question. And let me think. So you asked for an opinion, so I'm going to give you an opinion. So remember, that is an opinion is informed by my experience and my understanding, which is quite limited as well. Just like any other tool that we have, it is possible to leverage this technology and to create a system where we can have this symbiotic relationship. I think we're doing that already with many of the tools that we have. We're putting shoes on in the morning. We're staying in homes. We're putting clothes on. We're cooking on our cookers, and these are now parts of our these built tools are now parts of our lived environment, and it can be conscious or even subconscious when we do that. And I could see how it could be beneficial. And I think that is why we need to already at the very beginning, also with the mindset that people are not creating these tools to harm anybody, but that there can be harms that happen because of our blind spots, to already be critical, to have the difficult conversations around these tools, and to make sure that they're designed in a way that is inclusive. And the reason why I'm focusing on inclusivity is, so I don't know if you know that many times, one of the biggest injuries for women are in their hips and their knees. And that has to do also with the way that spaces are designed primarily by men for male bodies, I think, in some sense. But so if you're who is designing, who's involved in the design? And so I'm really, really glad that our moderator is a woman who's a computer scientist. No, and I'm very serious about that. And who's also not white, right? And so to the extent that we have more engagement, we need to also be active and not passive users of tools. And we have to remember that when we use tools, we're innovating. We're always innovating when we use tools, because we might be using them in new and interesting ways. And that's especially the case with these generative AIs, because they are interactive tools. And so I can see in the future where it's symbiotic and that it's used for the good of humanity. But the question is always, which humans?
Yeah.
And we're watchful for that.
Yeah, and that reminds me on an article that I have read in IEEE magazine, and that's that like, can we make like human-machine symbiosis, and the machines do what they are best at, and human do what they're good at, for instance, and yeah, just work together, so that we can cooperate together and not harm each other, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, one of the idea of making machine useful for us as well, right? Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah.
I just to add to that, I read a while back, and I'm very embarrassed because I don't remember who the authors of the article are, but they were two women, and they wrote about a caring relationship with algorithms, a caring relationship with AI. We tend to think about AI, and I've been calling it a tool this whole time, but we tend to think about AI as a property, right? Like it's a property, and you can just neglect your property or not care about it. But AI has a generative AI, at least, or many of these new technologies have a very interactive an interactive dimension. And so if you care about a plant, it blooms, it grows, you give it enough water, it gives you fruit. And so if we think about the tool also as something that we care about or invested in, we're more likely to have a tool that generates public value and does what it's best at, and lets us also do what we're best at, I think.
Yeah, thank you. It's very I think hopefully that answered the question. Yeah, we'll move to the next question by from Jamaluddin. So will ChatGPT be sustainable, or is it possible that there will be new technology that will replace it as technology continues to evolve? Right, and there might be a company currently preparing to become a competitor to ChatGPT. Google is already competing with Microsoft right now, so they'll think naturally.
I mean, I think we can speculate all we want. A lot of people who pay closer attention to this. I think that my thoughts are that some form of algorithm will always be there. It will always be sustainable. We've been using algorithms before we even called them algorithms, right? We've been using sort of decision tools and heuristics for as long as we have lived in community or even individually. So I think we will always have algorithms because they make our lives easier and they're convenient. Whether or not one company or one variant of that will be sustained over time has yet to be seen. It's a very interesting thing that we're watching, and I think it will be very also interesting to see what how the regulatory landscape will impact who ends up on top. So it's not just about how much is being invested by these competing companies into this, but it's also about whether or not there will be regulation that shapes who's advantage or not in the rollout of these. Because remember that Italy banned ChatGPT, but there's no talk about it banning other generative AI, right?
Yeah, that's right. So and it's currently evolving, like GPT-3 and GPT-4, and I think it will there will be newer versions soon. So yeah.
And I more than the question of whether it'll be sustainable, I think we should ask, will we want to sustain it? Because is it helpful? Is it useful? What advantages does it give us? It's great when people invent things, that's cool, but then we have to ask, did we ask for this? And if so, why did we ask for this and how can we use it? And so it's sustainable if we decide that it's sustainable, I think.
So it's really related to the users as well. How will they use this technology? Whether it will be beneficial or not. So I agree that it really depends on the user as well, right? Okay. Next question from Arina Frill. ChatGPT already generated plenty concerns about the possible misuse and bring bad impacts on integrity, honesty, and purity of academic world. Any tool which has been developed to detect and help teachers to identify the content generated using ChatGPT or similar tools in academic world. So this is more about so there are lots of concerns about the possible misuse of ChatGPT, like academic integrity, like you mentioned earlier, honesty and
plagiarism.
That's right. And so is there any tool which has been developed to detect and help teachers to solve that kind of problem?
So there are quite a few tools that have been developed. I've heard of quite a few. The one that comes to my mind right now is Zero GPT, I think, and it's developed by a student in Princeton and some of his collaborators. So there's a small group there, and they're using aspects of text like it's called burstiness. So like apparently humans tend to have bursts of creativity in their text. So a machine doesn't. So a machine will have the same level of creativity across the entire text, whereas humans have spontaneous bursts of ideas and thoughts in the text, and that's not in a patterned way. The machine hasn't learned yet how to do that, and then perplexity is another standard that they use. And so although Zero GPT or Pure GPT, I think there's another one that's called Pure GPT, are out there and are being used as tools to detect plagiarism. They use, I think, these features of textual features like of human patterns to detect. And I could imagine that ChatGPT knows this, or like the developer OpenAI and Google, they know this and they're trying to outrun that. But I'm pretty sure there's
So I also read in Twitter, like one of the tweets from OpenAI is that they are trying to flag or give like so they give like what do we watermark or something like that. They plan to have something like that too, so people can distinguish whether this is from a machine or not. But still, they are still thinking of improving the accuracy. But I think they are working on it, like to ease also people to differentiate or between whether it's machine or human. But let's see what happens in the future. But it's like a Turing test right now, Dr. Lee. It's like for us as a lecturer, it's it's sometimes hard for us as well to detect whether it's from the machine or from human. So it's like we're doing a Turing test as well. Yeah, but
I know. I think that this is also a great opportunity for us as teachers to,
Mhm.
I mean, I hate to call it an opportunity. This is very American sounding. I think that has to do with my educational background, but it's a huge incentive for us to think about how we assess teaching and learning, the opportunities that we give our students to demonstrate that they've learned. And it's also so for me, what this has meant is that I've gone back into my teaching toolkit and pulled out things that I didn't used to use because students dislike it, or because that I used to use, but I've stopped using because students dislike it, because they're embarrassed or whatever. So now I use more like role playing in the classroom, or more didactic, dialogical methods, also as a way of assessing student
Yeah.
learning and creativity. Pen and paper, drawing instead of just text as a way to communicate learning and demonstration. So it also challenges us to think about how we assess, or how we assess learning, and how would we give our students a chance to demonstrate that learning. Let us also not forget that we can also experiment with ChatGPT. And so one of the things that I've done is I've started to ask ChatGPT a question during a class, and we as students, like me, again, a teacher and a student at the same time, because I'm a professional learner, we unpack it and we say, oh, what does it tell us? What doesn't it tell us? Why isn't it telling us that? What do I know? So if you ask, I could ask all of you, who do you think is the most important sustainability scientist? You could ask ChatGPT if they know this name. And if that sustainability scientist is a local scientist, ChatGPT might not know it. And then you can ask yourself, I've asked my students, why don't they know this person? Why are the people that they know so mainstream, like Michael Mann, but why don't they know my sustainability scientist? Why don't they know about these things that I know to be fact, but they don't know? We can ask, like, who is made invisible or visible by the output? So if most people are using this output, and this output is the average, it's reflective of the average, what is being missed? What are we as scientists missing? What are we not talking about? What are we not publishing about? What are the biases among book publishers and journal that are being carried forward and being reflected to us? What are the societal biases and the power structures in science that are being reflected in scientific knowledge, that are being reflected by the AI onto us as a sort of a spotlight on our blind spots and our lack and our ignorances as well.
Yeah, interesting. So having like a group discussions can also, encourage the students to think critically. Yeah, they might get an answer from ChatGPT, but how can they think beyond that? So it's really interesting, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Still have lots of questions from Robin. And also there's Mas Aditya who has raised his hand. So just wait a little bit. I'll go through that after reading all the questions. Yeah. So from Mas Robin, I have a question about AI. Does AI will change the human labor soon? In my opinion, AI has no ability to particularly to a particular job, I think, which human touch, where there's human touch like art or having socialism, human being. So the question is more on will AI change the human labor or the job in the future?
I think it already has. And I have a friend in a mathematics department, and he said the best algorithm is the algorithm that you don't even know is around, like it's invisible. When you call a call center, more and more when you're on a banking platform, I just recently had a conversation with a chat box, about, can I order a new debit card? I've heard that there are AIs that decide when you call something and you're waiting to talk to a human being, that they decide what kind of customer you are, whether you're a valuable customer or not, and the valuable customers get put at the top of the list, and the less valuable get for waiting times. I think that AI is being used increasingly in bureaucracies because we have low staffing and lots of citizens to serve. And so AI is taking already, at least here, a lot of the decisions that we ask humans to take. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't know. We also know that AI is generating books, essays, art.
Right.
And so whether it will replace humans, I don't know. Like we can have like a dystopian novel here.
Yeah, and
but
it's very subjective as well, right? To,
But whether it's changing our labor, I would say it is already having an impact on many people's labor. Whether it is changing the ways that we work, I would say that it already is doing that. Whether it changes how we engage with one another, we've all heard about social media and how people engage with one another. I would say it is also having an impact there. Whether what we know to be true is true, I would say that algorithms that decide what we see and how we see it, it is also already having an impact on our knowledge base. Whether that is good or not, I don't know. But some of the tasks that we used to do ourselves is now being taken over by technology. But that has always been the case. That's if you get on a bike or you get in a car, that is how. So value neutral, I think it is already changing, and it probably more intensely.
Yeah, agree. Right. So from the Darmawan, how do we start introducing AI to students? So how do we start to introduce this artificial intelligence to students? Should be any minimum age, like when should we actually teach AI to students?
That's a tough question. So I would say we should all play with, well, not should. I'm not going to dictate to you guys how to spend your time, because really, honestly, I would really like to nap sometimes and not be told what to do. But I would say if we really are interested and invested in teaching with AI or having this question, I would say let's play with the AI. Let's see what its affordances are, its limitations are, but let's really think about what we need our students to learn. What are the objectives of our educational system? What do we want them to learn? And that should be the guide on when and how. We should always center on our content.
Yeah, and there's also a book for babies even that teach about neural network. Do you know about that?
No, I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
but I just bought coding in Python for 6-year-olds.
for 6-year-olds. Okay, right.
So I mean, I think there's so many ways that we can work with this and do this, and I think that I'm really not the expert to be. What I just said earlier was an opinion. I think I'm not the expert to think about that, but there are education specialists out there, people who will really spend all of their time thinking about pedagogy, and I think that they are thinking about that question, and I hope that they will give us some good advice here shortly.
Yeah. All right, so we have one audience that has raised his hand. Mas Aditya, can you open your unmute yourself? Sorry for waiting for a long time. Hope you still remember the question. Okay, so please, Mas Aditya.
Thank you for your opportunity, Dr. Medria and Dr. Le. I really appreciate your presentation, and I don't want to ask a question, but I only want to give my point of view. So, in my opinion, when we use AI for academic purposes, we skipped some step while we learn, because when we're looking and searching for the answers, it train us to be creative or think critically and optimizing our brain. As we know, brain is the most powerful thing that we have. It helps ourselves to develop and survive from 1,000 years ago. So I think there will be no technology that can be compared with what human have. If we lean on the technology, maybe what Terminator or Avengers Ultron movie will happen sooner or later. So based on what I've learned, it is better for us to use any AI or technology only as a tool, not purposes. So that's all from me, and I hope I say it correctly. Maraming salamat.
Walang anuman. Salamat. Salamat din. Yeah. A lot of what you say resonates with me. It really does, and I think that we should never forget what it is essentially that makes us human, and why we are here, and if we want to learn, we can learn alongside these tools and these new things, and that it won't be just ChatGPT. And we can learn from different places. We can learn from books, we can learn from our own experiences, and we can also learn from our elders and the people in our community. So there's so many different ways to learn and places to learn from. Yeah.
So does that answer your question, Mas Aditya? Do you still want to
It's more
respond
than
on
enough.
that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Totally, and thank you, Mas Aditya. Okay, we have another question from Mas Sultan Aziz Barai.
Yeah, greetings. Thank you
Hello.
very much for giving me the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Regarding the ChatGPT, I'd like to ask about the references, because most of the time when we are using or when we want to ask something from ChatGPT, they're not giving us accurate references. And sometimes even the ChatGPT they will give, but it will not work. And that's the thing, that most of the information will be not accurate and it will not be reasonable. In addition, many students, they're using the ChatGPT, they got too much lazy. They're not focusing on the reading of a lot of books and like getting the information from the journal. I think these are some key points that need to be considered while using the ChatGPT. Most of the information, like I have tried 2 times to use the ChatGPT, like to get the full information about it, like how it works, does information are accurate, is it reasonable? But unfortunately, when I regenerated the one question for 5 times, the first answer and the second answer, the third answer, the fourth and fifth and sixth, all of them are different. So they are not giving us the accurate answer and the accurate information.
Yeah.
I think which is something was really that avoided me to not like think about it again. And that was my experience in using ChatGPT.
Thank you for sharing your
you.
experience. And yeah, I think that you brought up a point that I forgot to bring up, is that ChatGPT will not generate the same answer if you ask it the same question again, just like a human being. We also won't always generate the same answer if you ask us a question. I think that, yeah, I know that they're working on the references issue and the accuracy issue. So I know that OpenAI and also Google, all of the people who are working on generative AI are working on these questions. But that, I think what your experience has been is really encouraging, is that people are still using their discernment when they're doing that. People are refusing to be intellectually lazy when they're using these tools. I think that is the most important thing, is that we aren't allowing ourselves to be intellectually lazy. And perhaps in the classroom, one of the things that we can do is we can really slow it down, and remind students how to read, how to think critically. It's really content. So content, for a long time, the World Wide Web is supposed to democratize our ability to get information. What it doesn't do is it doesn't give us an idea of what is good information. How do you judge information? How do you understand how does information serve you? And so these are things that we should be more active, I believe, I'm arguing for here. We should be more active in teaching our students. Where do you look for content? What is good content? How are you discerning? And whenever you're facing not only a generative AI, but also an expert, also your teacher, also somebody who has written many books, always respectfully, of course, in an engaging and curious manner, also say, you made the statement, but it's not really something that aligns with my understanding. Can we have a conversation about that? In the same way that the AI is not always, accurate, arguments from authority. And if your professor or the expert is really intellectually honest, then they will consider what you have to say, and they will think about this, and they will engage with you. They will understand what they know, and they will also admit what they don't know, and you can learn from each other and grow together. I think that this is not just the AI tools, but this is any kind of information. We shouldn't take it as fact. We should always question. I think that this is what makes us human as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like the guidelines for those people who are learners, especially for researchers. And it will reduce your time assumption, the consumption of the time. In addition, it will give the true multiple choice. Like we can brainstorm that whether the information is correct or not. But then they will give us as this chat is not 100% accurate information, that it will give a 5% or 10%, of a small key point. Yeah, I'm accurate with that. Especially for students, maybe it might be good for a student or bachelor, as it will give us, to be honest, I don't recommend it for people who are doing PhD or master's.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it either, at least not in this current iteration. But let's not forget that 4 articles already in January were published with ChatGPT as co-author. It'll be interesting to see how they I didn't go direct, so I didn't do my homework. I didn't go directly to those articles to see how they discuss the author contributions. So in most journals you say how each author has contributed to a scientific endeavor. I don't know what kind of author contributions they attributed to ChatGPT there. I think that like any technology, it is what we make it, and we can use it to learn, and we can also use it to code, right? Like we can also think about the infrastructure of ChatGPT. We can also think about what are the patterns that we see in ChatGPT. It's also an interesting thing to study. ChatGPT, I think, this is my feeling. This is how I feel. It puts the teachers also in the role of being a student once again. We're also again learning. We're also learning about the possibilities and the limitations, and we're also learning about ourselves as teachers and what it is. I would say that we should use tools, among which ChatGPT is many, that we feel are most appropriate for the point in time where we're teaching.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Lee, and also Mas Sultan for the questions. I think we have still lots of questions, but unfortunately we have limited time, Dr. Lee and the audience. But maybe we can have one comment from Prof. Damayanti, or maybe a questions. Yeah.
Now I don't have any question. I'm just amazed because the questions I wanted to ask is already asked by someone else. Actually, I really like the question on how to have a symbiotic relationship, because I believe that the technology is here, so it's here to stay, and how can we live side by side? I think that is very important. And also I really like the way Leanne mentioned earlier also, that still make the students very critical, let them know the ethics. So I think all of this is just challenging for us as a teacher, as a scientist. How is it that ethics and science should be taught at the same level at the university? It's just, I don't know how to do it, because there are so many so many things to learn. Yeah, I'm here to learn, and I really like the conversation today because Leanne, you opened up a lot of my mind on. Before I was very negative about ChatGPT because I thought, oh, it's just terrible. But now after listening to your explanation, I thought, okay, it's here, and let us be open about it, and let's do our best to use this to the advantage for humanity, but also understanding the limited, and that's where then the policy, the governance comes into play. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I would just like to remind everybody about one thing. So we've had calculators now since I was going to high school and I was also going to grade school. We've had calculators, right? But that doesn't stop teachers from teaching students how to add, how to subtract, how to divide, how to multiply, the order of operations, and how we should think about mathematics. That doesn't stop teachers, even though we have a tool, a calculator that does all of these things for us, that doesn't stop teachers from teaching students, young students, what the fundamentals of mathematics are, what the basis of their knowledge are. So even if we have a tool, a generative tool that will do a lot of these things, that shouldn't stop us from teaching our students the fundamentals of language, the fundamentals of thinking, of social science or biological sciences. Just because that is out there, that shouldn't discourage us from making sure that our students, our future leaders, have that fundamental knowledge with which they can have the proper amount of discernment around when to use a tool, how to use it best, and so just because it's out there doesn't mean we stop teaching, and it also doesn't mean that we stop learning.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. It's a very insightful and very nice closing remarks, and hopefully as a teacher, as a students, with the rapid growing of technology nowadays, it's important for us to rather than avoiding technology, we'll think about how can we just live side by side, as mentioned by Prof. Damayanti, and also like knowing the foundations of our theory is very important, so we can think critically and give also feedback to the answer given by ChatGPT. So the message is stay critical, also stay humble, and stay responsible with the technology that we have nowadays. I think. Thank you, Dr. Lee and Prof. Damayanti, and also all the audience. I think thank you so much for the talk today, and hope it will be beneficial for all of us. I myself learned a lot from this session, and I hope all the audience also have learned a lot from this talk. Thank you. So I will give it back to Erica. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. What an insightful discussion from Dr. Lian and also Dr. Medria as our moderator. Thank you so much, Dr. Medria Hardinata as our moderator, and also Dr. Lian Long as our speaker, who presented very well and gave us knowledge and perspective about how ChatGPT affects education and how challenging and interesting it is at the same time, and also how that kind of automation means in teaching and learning and research. And I also want to say thank you to participants who shared your thoughts and experiences in the chat about ChatGPT because it gives colors and interactiveness in our discussion today. And please give a round of applause for Dr. Long and Dr. Hardinata. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all have seen in the chat box, there is an attendance form, and I would like to remind all of you to fill the attendance form to get an e-certificate. And after this, we are going to have a photo session, and the first photo session will capture our speaker, moderator, and head of CTSS. So please to the operator, to the committee, to give a spotlight to Professor Damayanti Buhori, and please take a screenshot. All right, to the operator, I will count to 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I guess it's enough. Yeah, one picture of all of us. Thank you so much once again to Professor Damayanti Bohri, to Dr. Long, and also Dr. Hardinata. And the second photo session will goes to all participants. So please turn on your camera, open your camera, and give us a big smile for this exciting and interesting session today. And for the operator, please take a screenshot. There are I guess there are 3 slides in my Zoom meeting, and I think we are going to go to the first slide first. To the operator, can you please take a screenshot in 3, 2, 1? All right, thank you so much for the first slide, and we are going to go to the next slide. Oh, I guess there are not a lot of people open camera. I think it's enough, for the photo session. Once again, thank you so much for the participants and our speaker and moderator. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to remind all of you to fill out the attendance form that has been sent in the chat box to get an e-certificate. And please share your feedback about CTSS webinar on that form as well. And I have an interesting news that might be catch your attention in this afternoon. Please, for the operator to share screen about the essay and video documentary contest. So I would like to inform you that CTSS-IPB held another fruitful event as it appeared on the screen. CTSS-IPB will held an essay and video documentary contest with a total prize of 46,500,000 rupiah. It's such a big prize, isn't it? And please take note that this competition will close on April 30th, 2023. So please submit your essay and video documentary before that date. And take a note that the theme of this competition is belajar dari masa lalu untuk mengkreasikan masa depan. And if you are curious and interested for this competition, you can access our social media and website to get further information, or you can access the link on the screen, ipb.link/panduan-contest-CTSS. There are still 18 days left to join the competition, so don't miss it because the big prize awaits. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we are at the end of our seminar, and I would like to express my appreciation to all participants, speaker, moderator, who participate in the 14th Graduate Student Seminar on Sustainability today. I am Erika Mutiara signing out, and I am so sorry if there's any mistakes, and see you on the next CTSS webinar series. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank